All right, well, it's 3 o'clock, so we'll get going. You're in the last session, or at least the last group of sessions for this year's Connecticut Affordable Housing Conference. Thank you all for joining us now, and hopefully you got to see a lot of other great sessions. As we head into the final act here, again, if you want to join the conversation on social media, you can see links there and hashtags, etc. So now we're in session 6.2, an importance of pre-development and how to fund it. And we have some really tremendous speakers on this panel. I'm really looking forward to it. But first, I just want to go over just a few items. That's our generous sponsors, Connecticut Housing Finance Authority and Wells Fargo. You can see our champions sponsors. All right, just quick housekeeping. We're recording this session as we've recorded all of them except one. And those will be made available shortly, maybe a week or so from now, on Partnership for Strong Communities YouTube channel. Please keep your microphone muted so that we can hear the speakers. And myself and Alicia Gardner, our senior policy analysts at the partnership, are on the session here. And if you're having any technical issues, you can drop a note to us in the chat. And now I will hand it off to Elizabeth from LISC.
Thanks very
And I'll
much.
stop sharing my screen.
Sean, I noted that no one is monitoring the waiting room. Could you keep an eye
I'll
on
take
that?
care of that.
Great. I did let everyone in. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll take care of that.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen here. I'm Elizabeth Vinnick. I am the lender at LISC Connecticut. I am really excited to be here today, and I'm joined by several colleagues. Lisa Dombeck, the pre-development loan manager at the Connecticut Department of Housing, Sarah Miner, the director of real estate development at Mutual Housing Association of Greater Hartford, and Tashina Pemberton Mann, the real estate development project manager for Nest in Waterbury. I put together this panel because I wanted to help zero in on the beginning stage of the affordable housing development process. I've heard from a lot of people since I started at LISC about 6 months ago that they'd like to be a part of the solution. These are individuals, towns, housing professionals. They want to become more involved with the actual building of affordable housing in their communities. And often they've identified a site, a piece of land, but then they don't know what to do next. We are really lucky in Connecticut to have a state government that has prioritized funding for pre-development activities, and Lisa's going to talk about that program in a moment. But not every state offers that. So before we move to Lisa's presentation about the state's pre-development funding program, I'm going to quickly run through how CDFIs like LISC are set up to fund pre-development activities. And then I'll walk through some of the basics on why pre-development activities and pre-development funding is important. Then we're going to hear from Lisa about the state's program, to be followed by Sarah, who has extensive experience with very large 9% tax credit projects. And then to end the session, we'll hear from Tashina, who has become involved with affordable housing development more recently. And she'll really speak on how she approaches the pre-development phase of the project as someone with a fresh set of eyes and smaller scale projects now moving into larger scale projects. CDFIs are private financial institutions whose primary mission is to help communities that are not able to access traditional capital. We have a lot of CDFIs across the state. There are more than 1,200 CDFIs in the United States, and each one is different from the other. But their purpose is often the same: innovative lending options, including less stringent terms and education. CDFIs are more flexible and creative than traditional lenders. They're often offering credit enhancements and interest rate subsidy to help bring down rate for developers. They are also more patient typically than traditional lenders, and that makes it really helpful, because sometimes with affordable housing projects, it can take 6 to 7 years to go from pre-development and acquisition through to completion. Underwriting, though, is sometimes trickier. I know that it's sometimes hard to go through the underwriting process for people who are new to development, but it also often includes capacity building activities that are provided by the CDFIs to help organizations really be sure that they have the capacity to take on the kind of project they're doing. You can see here from this slide that overviews LISC's activities that CDFIs offer a very wide range of products. LISC, it gets involved with pre-development and acquisition and works all the way through to permanent financing, bridge financing, and working capital. And then also, in addition to affordable housing, all kinds of other project categories as well. Capacity building is also another big piece of what CDFIs offer. Sometimes it feels like it's slowing down the project, but often that capacity building can really help an organization take on projects that it didn't used to be able to take on. Why is pre-development funding important? Financial assistance for projects is really important early on, because it gives the organization the opportunity to build pipeline, but also to get ahead of risk that might be in the project and to really understand thoroughly what they're up against with a specific project. It includes information like how to select a site, how to sort through options for site development, eliciting community input, gathering due diligence materials, and we'll hear a lot about this from Sarah and Tashina about how their work has been informed by the due diligence that they've collected during the pre-development period. It also includes feasibility analysis, identifying partners, and understanding regulatory permitting and requirements. I'm going to move on now to Lisa. I do ask that if you have comments, please put them in the chat, but we'll get to them at the end. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Elizabeth, for the introduction. Again, my name is Lisa Dombeck. I am a pre-development loan manager and housing specialist too within the state of Connecticut Department of Housing. I'm really just going to be walking through the key elements of what pre-development loans mean to the department and how to request funding. In the next few slides, I'll be discussing pre-development basics, eligible and ineligible activities, special considerations to keep in mind, threshold concerns that the Department of Housing focuses on, and how to apply. Jumping on in, how does DOH define pre-development? As many of you know, a pre-development loan serves as a critical lifeline during the early stages of a development project. It specifically targets the upfront costs associated with project planning and preparation, allowing developers to enhance their vision and align them with the needs of the communities that they aim to serve. These loans are bridges to the gaps between concept and execution, therefore ensuring a solid foundation for the successful project. Keep in mind that all proposed projects seeking DOH support with pre-development funding must be eligible for financial assistance from the DOH in the construction and perm financing of the development, and also plan to provide housing for those at or below 100% of the area media income. About these loans, DOH loans are provided with non-amortizing 0% interest, and the maturity date would either be at closing of the construction perm financing or 3 years of the original pre-development loan closed, whichever occurs first. All of the loans are secured by a mortgage at the project, on the project property, and by an or by an appropriate alternative collateral. Loans can vary between $50,000 to $300,000 per project. Who can benefit? At this time, DOH pre-development loans are only eligible for nonprofit organizations, community-based organizations, also known as CHODOs, and or public housing authorities. Unfortunately, at this time, for-profit organizations are not eligible to receive DOH pre-development loans. I know I mentioned this previously, but projects must be planning to finance and develop affordable housing in connection with the construction, rehab, or redevelopment for housing of low to moderate income individuals and families. Eligible activities. Pre-development costs within DOH are defined as expenses that are not administrative and are necessary for planning before the construction stage of the project. Below are just some key eligible activities with some examples of items that would fall under that category. Some of these categories are architectural and engineer design, environmental reports and testing, interim financing expenses, appraisals and market studies, site option payments, and consultant fees. Ineligible activities, DOH pre-development program will not pay for expenses incurred more than 6 months prior to the submitted application date. Some categories that are ineligible would be acquisition or mortgage payments, payoff of other pre-development loans, any pre-construction activities or purchase of construction materials, operating or lease-up reserve accounts, legal fees that surpass necessary requirements in order to submit the development funding application to DOH, and not administrative expenses. These are just special considerations if you're planning to apply for a DOH pre-development loan. It would be my recommendation to keep the below topics in mind, as they are requirements for applying for the development financing with our agency. In no specific order: procurement, SEPA, which is also the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, SHPO, DEEP, state prevailing wages, and Davis-Bacon. Threshold issues that we will see often. These are some of the main factors that DOH take into consideration when considering funding for any pre-development and even development applications. Capacity being a big one, feasibility, and housing needs. And to what everyone wants to know is how to apply. The Department of Housing, and in partnership with CHFA, they hold a biannual development engagement process, which invites any developer looking to apply for funding for the new construction, rehab, or preservation of affordable housing. There are no requirements to expend funds in any way in order to complete and submit this DEP application. My recommendation would be to monitor the DOH website for future open applications. They tend to fall in the fall and spring of each year. And if you have any inquiries, which include questions about pre-development opportunities, I would reach out to the DEP address that's listed below.
Thanks, Lisa. Before we move on, can you talk just quickly about how far along does someone need to be with their project before they fill out the application and come to a meeting?
Just to have an idea, have land, want to develop it. It's really the very, very beginning stages.
So when someone comes to the developer engagement meeting, they might come back again and have regular meetings with DOH as a part of that process?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a pretty unique, special program because people really can come with an idea and receive a lot of guidance and feedback from DOH. I'm looking forward to following up with you on that during the questions at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now we're going to move on to Sarah. Sarah, I know you have a special project to talk about, and then more generally just about the work.
So I'm going to talk about a project in Hartford called the Hub on Park. So this is something that is through and constructed, so we can say we made it. So just about mutual housing, we have been around for a few decades now, and we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We have 18 properties and 686 units. Most of them are LIHTC. We do have HUD and some state housing programs, and then some market rate or unrestricted. And I have been with mutual housing now for 13 years in the doing real estate development. So the Hub on Park was a project that was started in 2016 was the first time we actually started, and finished in 2015 or 2021. So it was 5 years that it went from our first acquisition to actually completing the project. As a tax credit project, you do have placed in service deadlines that we were up against, and COVID was also a fun thing to go through during this. So it was $16 million total. We had 12 different funders in that. So a lot of people to work through underwriting, a lot of legal teams. And at the end of the day, it was 45 units that were created in 4 different buildings. So I'm just going to talk about the pre-development phase, but there's multiple phases of development. So in pre-development, I'll go through in depth a little bit of what we went through. But this just kind of lays out my development cycle from pre-development, development, construction, and operations. So in pre-development here, we had 4 different sites. We had 4 different owners, which requires a lot of negotiations on purchase. And you'll see when I break down what my uses were for my pre-development funds, a lot went in an acquisition, because once somebody heard we were doing a project, they wanted higher prices on theirs, and that always hurts us. So the large red parcel was it was a French club and then a church. It had become obsolete. The church had wanted to sell it and could not find a use for it. It had leaks coming through the roof. It was covered in asbestos. So it really wasn't in a functional state anymore. And then the yellow square is 3 historic buildings. So this is within a historic district. So we had to get clearance on all the historic, which adds a layer in pre-development, making sure you can get through planning and zoning. But first of that is historic district commission approval. So when we set out, we have environmental is a large part of what's going to determine how expensive your pre-development is. Your site, your dirt, there's a lot of testing that's needed. And so here we were unfortunate. We had underground storage tanks. They had buried a building in the red section. You see that parcel. In the 90s, the city had demolished and buried a building. We thought we identified where an oil tank would be. It turned out that it was not there. We found it when we went to start construction. And so the site shut down for a little bit, but we did all the due diligence that we thought we could, had maps with the environmental people to determine where any kind of oil tank or any other discovery would be. And unfortunately, sometimes you just find stuff out in the field. Luckily, you have a contingency to cover for that. But you do a lot of due diligence on the site, the soil, the environmental. And then, so that was a big piece of our cost. And we also needed to get 3 variances here. So we went through planning and zoning, and this is all before we have an actual project. So we're doing all this in the hope that we will be able to put together an application that makes sense and someone's going to want to fund. So when you start this, we have an idea of what our sources are going to be. That's part of our go, no go. But you have to first get your planning and zoning approval, and you have to hire the lawyers. You have to have architectural far enough along that you can actually present to your planning and zoning. So there's so many costs that go in before you can even get to application. So in the next slide, I'll show you how much we spent before we, well, I'll talk more about risks and mitigations, and then I'll talk about how much we spent to get to application. So here you can see I had to borrow 96% of the money that I went in, and spoiler is $1.9 million that I had to spend prior to actually starting construction. Most of that acquisition. Hopefully other projects are able to negotiate purchase and sale agreements that have long time periods, or site control in another way that don't require you to actually purchase the properties. But here, that was not possible. So we did actually have to purchase in order to get site control prior to application, which is a requirement in the state for tax credits that you have to have site control. So the risks are that when you're purchasing, you have loan to value considerations. Generally, the properties are never worth what people want, but strategically, mutual housing already owned 300 units in this neighborhood. We already had 25 buildings. So it made sense that we would overpay for something in order to continue to strategically protect our investments, but also it's part of our overall strategy, our targeted neighborhood development strategy here. So in the meantime, we have to carry those properties for 2 years, 3 years until we're getting to application. And so there's the real estate taxes and the insurance. So making sure that when I am putting together my budgets, my pro formas for this, I've built in a way to cover that, and mostly I'm borrowing that. So coming up with working with CDFIs that will understand that those costs are possibly never recapturable because the loan to value considerations are not there, but they believe in your mission. So there's a lack of collateral on all these pre-development loans. They're basically underwriting my organization every time, saying that my organization has a track record of doing this. And we believe that they have the capacity to do this. So we're going to continue moving forward, knowing that there's no actual takeout source. So lucky for us, we work with, and the next slide will show you a few different CDFIs that go through that. Sorry, if you can go back just one for a second. And so what do I do to mitigate this in the meantime when basically I bet the organization every time? If we have a clear vision and we can explain it to anybody, whether it's our board, whether it's a funder, that's our first step, is how do we really convey how important it is and what it can mean transformative for the neighborhood. And then we always build an extra time, knowing that we probably aren't going to get it the first time we apply for funding. It's so competitive out there for tax credits. So we build in that extra year or maybe 2 years if you need 2 rounds to make sure that you have enough time. And then with these acquisitions, can we disinvest? Could we sell them and what would we get back and what would that gap look like? And what's our plan for the gap? We have never had to sell anything, but we have to be realistic that at some point the project may not come together. We have to figure out a way that we can make people whole again. And then one way we have also moved forward is whenever we get a developer fee, we now fund our internal revolving funds so that I don't need to rely on loans as much. I have something within my organization. And we're a small nonprofit. We don't have cash. That's one of the hardest things is cash is really hard to come by. We have our reputation and our integrity and we work really hard, but we definitely don't have cash. So just putting a little bit of our developer fee each time away has actually created a sense of comfort for us that we know we can move a little bit faster and then also make people trust that we can do this, and it helps my balance sheet. And then I do have a go, no go checklist I do with my board. I have a committee on my board. So every time we're going through these phases, we go through its mission alignment, its financial ability to pay it back, my capacity. And so we go through it at each phase, concept, pre-development, and construction to make sure we're all on the same page. And then meanwhile, none of this is covering my staff, me or my staff. So finding ways for operating grants to keep us moving along. So we've been very fortunate. DOH, LISC, Neighborhood Development Support Collaborative have always been able to cover part of my time so that while I wait 5 years for my developer fee, I still have a paycheck that comes in. So here you'll see the giant green bar is acquisition. So LISC in this project was one of the only lenders we could go to because they actually can do 120% loan to value money. It was a TOD project, transit oriented development. So they had a special fund. And that was key here because we were paying more and we had all those carrying costs. So being able to work with LISC to get the acquisition funds to carry the properties for 3 years before construction started was really important. Also, we're a NeighborWorks America organization. So that's not going to apply to probably anybody else on this call, but it's a congressionally chartered membership. And so through that, we have access to a CDFI there. So NeighborWorks Capital came in, they covered a lot of the architectural and some other of the soft costs. Then Capital for Change, local Connecticut-based CDFI was able to cover some other expenses. Then Mutual Housing had to put in whatever else couldn't be covered. So this is all prior to LIHTC application. Here's the grand reveal. Go to the next slide. We spent $1.9 million. So you would probably think that's insane because that's a little insane, but you can see it's acquisition, right? So if you can get your site control some other way, that's really how you keep your costs down. Here, as you know, you can see that there's a lot for architectural engineering. They have to do a lot and it's their stamp and their license on the line. So it's understandable that they want to be paid prior to construction. So they're not going to waive their fees if you don't get funded. So just being very honest and open about that. And because I had to borrow all that money, that big orange a little slice there is interest. So if I had cash, I could do this all and not have to pay any of that and move a lot faster. But as a small nonprofit, we're never going to have the cash. So we do have to work closely with our pre-development funders to make these projects work. And then why do you do it, right? So that's all I'm saying. Why do you spend $1.9 million, risk the organization each time? Because you can take projects like the befores and after and really transform something. So this is a small 3-unit building that totally transformed the street. There's 3 of them right next to each other, but you can see the kitchen is the exact same layout. We just shifted it over and that we opened up the door to the hallway. So the before and after is quite striking. These are non-usable before, and now there's families that I think the same families that moved in 2020, because this building turned over first, are still in place. People love these units. So there's another before and after too. So we tore down that building, which was covered in asbestos, non-functional, obsolete, and built this new construction. So 36 units. If you drive down Park Street now on the corner of Park Terrace and Park Street, you see this large building. With low HERS numbers, has solar panels, very comfortable heating and cooling for residents. So we were able to transform something that was non-functional into something that was beautiful and provides homes for 36 low-income families.
Sarah, as you're looking at new projects, how much of a pipeline do you have to have in order to kind of keep things moving? And where are you already working on your next project, knowing that you've finished pre-development on one project usually? Or?
Yeah, so we try to keep one in pre-development, one in construction, and then one in closeout beyond that, because it's really hard with a smaller organization to have enough cross guarantees I can give. Each of these require that the mutual housing provides some kind of guarantee, and that's really difficult. So I can only have 2 active projects at a time, really, before it's become too much. So we always try to keep a pipeline. I'm lucky right now. I've got a 9% allocation in April. So I'm currently working on closing a 9% deal. I have another application that hopefully will go in shortly. And then I have something in the pipeline for a 2025 4% submission. So I need to close this one now that I got tax credit in order to make sure I have enough money to continue working on the one that won't be till later 2025. So it's a balancing act. I'd like to continue as fast as I can, but I also have to realize there's limited resources and risks I can bring onto my organization.
I'd love to hear more during the question period about how you got to this point, how you built up your book of business to be able to just move from one thing to another. You make it look easy, but it's really hard. So, okay. Moving on to Sheena. Looking to see. I know Tashina was having video issues. Are you here?
I am. Can you hear me?
Great. Yes.
Hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Tashina Pemberton Mann. I am the Real Estate Development Project Manager for Nest in Waterbury, formerly Neighborhood Housing Services of Waterbury. And I will be talking about pre-development on the homeownership side. So I've only been with Nest for about 2 years now. Before that, I was not in affordable housing. And the first project that I was really pulled into was our Adams Street redevelopment, which is kind of like our baby over at Nest. It is essentially it was oh my gosh, I'm losing my words. It was a whole neighborhood redevelopment initiative that we have, the neighborhood of Crownbrook in Waterbury. The neighborhood's been neglected for quite some time. And this one street in particular, Adams Street, had blighted homes, empty lots and such. And so the organization really took it upon themselves to in order to embark on the neighborhood transformation, to really transform the street first. So in these next 2 slides, I'll be talking about Adams Street specifically, but specifically the first phase of Adams Street, which is our 31 and 35 Adams Street. The picture that you're looking at right now is 35. Below you have the other 4 homes on Adams Street that we will be putting in place sometime next year, as well as a pocket park. What's really great about these homeownership opportunities is the ability for the owner to not just be like, an owner occupied, but also a landlord as well. So each home has 2 units. but obviously, you know, they purchased the entire home. Yeah, if we can go on to, oh, and then the AMI, I should say, is we're targeting 80% and lower for the homeowner, 60% and lower for the renter. Just to give you a little bit of background just about the project itself. On to the next slide, please. So in this project, and this is 31 Adams Street, this is actually my favorite one. But what's really unique about this project is in total for the 6 homes that we have on Adams Street, plus the other 2 homes that we're building in the neighborhood, we received like a $250,000 pre-development from DOH, which was wonderful, just to help us get it started. You know, in the pre-development of this, the things we mostly focused on was one, program development. Obviously the preliminary work with like the engineers, architect, the environmental stuff, and then really developing the development team. We have some really great people on the development team. We have an awesome consultant plus a really great architecture firm here in Waterbury. Yeah, if you can go on to the next slide. And then, so Adams Street was like one part of the homeownership. Now we have Sunrise Farms, which is another part of the homeownership, which I think is really cool. So Adams Street, we had multifamily. Sunrise Farms is mostly single family homes, and it's a much larger project. If you can see one of the diagrams here, it's about 62 units. I'm give or take, I might be a little bit off, but we are still in the preliminary phases of of Sunrise Farms. So for Adams Street, I know we already basically closed out phase 1 and we're embarking on phase 2. But all of the pre-development stuff has kind of already been done. For Sunrise Farms, we are embarking on the pre-development, which is really interesting, specifically because we are literally like a month in. And I know anybody who has been doing pre-development, they know how much work that can be, especially with, you know, getting conceptual designs with your architect, making sure that everybody is communicating well, developing your development team, knowing who exactly is going to be working on the project, what's everyone's roles, how are we going to get the money, who's going to give us funding for these projects. With home ownership, but I personally love home ownership because you can really see with rentals, you can see a community grow, but you can see it a little bit more specifically with home ownership, right? Because you're not just placing people in homes, you're giving people the opportunity for a brighter, more sustainable future. The other thing I forgot to mention about Adams Street is we also have solar panels on the top of each of those houses. You can't see them there, but that is to help with the energy costs by reducing it, because we all know energy costs in Connecticut is ridiculous right now, but that's okay. We live and learn and we grow, right? Elizabeth, if you can go back to the next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, in our Sunrise Farms development, we're currently, like I said, we're in the pre-development phase, so we're getting our conceptual designs down. You know, we're having conversations with different funders, specifically with like DOH and the CDFI here in Connecticut. We also are, you know, we've got some preliminary environmental stuff done, but we still have a lot of work to do, right? So it's the groundwork, the soil sampling, the geotechnical work, all of that stuff that still has to get done. And all of that stuff costs a lot of money. The fun, or I shouldn't say the fun thing about it though, the interesting thing about it is once you kind of have, you know, I'll go back to what Lisa said, once you kind of have like an initial idea down and you can communicate that idea well, as well as, you know, once the mission aligns with the goal of not just like your organization, but your funders, it's not easier to get your developments through, but at least, you know, you're all communicating towards the same goal, right? Elizabeth, can you go to the next slide, please? So so some of the things that I want to talk about specifically for me, because these are challenges that I personally see when we're getting into pre-development is like, so what are, when we're developing the program, what are the parameters of the program? For Adam Street, we knew what AMIs we were tackling, right? We knew what the funders wanted to see, and we also knew what that neighborhood kind of needed. So for our first two homes, we essentially we lowered the AMI because we knew that, you know, there are people who can't necessarily, I shouldn't say that. There are families who have lower incomes, but and who don't necessarily know that they can get that kind of home, that kind of future. And so it was really important to us that we reduce the AMI for the home ownership, so that we can work with not with specific families, but with a specific group, right? Um, like I said, does it align with the mission? Our 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 organization's mission, I believe, and I saw Maybeth is on this call, so she can correct me, is we are making communities of choice, not circumstance. And I think that's a really important, it's really important to have within every single one of your developments to make sure that you're sticking with your mission and your vision. Because once you start getting derailed, you know, it just becomes a lot less fluid and cohesive, right? Um, and with that, like I said, that's in line with the funders' priorities. Are they also are you meeting like the needs assessment that they have? You're I'll move on to the next one. So like, oh no, I'm not, I'm so sorry. In terms of funding, so for Adam Street, I'll give you an example. We got an HTCC award for Adam Street, and that it didn't limit us, but it really had us hone in on the families that we would attract in terms of like their AMIs, right? But that's what kind of like attracted the award, is because we were able to lower that AMI, as opposed to we may not have gotten it with if we had increased that AMI, right? The Who will pay for what? So like, for instance, DOH will not pay for demolition, but someone else might pay for demolition. So you also have to make sure that like when you're looking at your pre-development funds, you have aligned every single dollar for a specific job, for a specific goal. How quickly do we have to spend the money is another really important one, because I often forget that we have to spend money very quickly. Or not very quickly, but timely, right? Because no one wants to see that you've given them an award and it just sits. And then is this something that you're gonna have to pay back? So for Adam Street, I keep on referencing Adam Street because it's my child. But we had a $215,000 pre-development loan, right? But I believe we had gotten another pre-development award. So which one do we have to pay back? How quickly do we have to pay back? When do we have to pay it back? These are all very important things that you have to keep in mind, not only through pre-development, but throughout the entire lifespan of the development. Because you don't want to owe anybody any money, especially DOH. They're kind, but you know. And then the final thing that we have to keep in mind is, one, do you have the capacity in your organization to do the work? Do you have a solid development team? Like, are your consultants all together? Do you have like an architect? Are your engineers all talking with your architect? Is everyone communicating well? And then what is the impact of the project? And when I say the impact of the project, like, who are we going to be? How is the project going to impact the community? Is it gonna lessen the blight? Is it gonna? Oh, we have 10 minutes. I'll stop talking right now. I'm so sorry. Am I okay to just finish up for like one more minute?
Please do, Tashina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the extent of the impact of the project, and these are all things that you're gonna need to include in your project applications, like your narratives and such, right? So you want to make sure that the impact is really substantial. I know for Adam Street, we just even like the first two homes on that street has turned the neighborhood around so much. And there's more pride in the neighborhood. People are coming and they're just like, how do we do this? But for everyone here, right? We have neighbors who we've never spoken to who are now coming out to us and they're just like, this is such a good thing that we've done. How can we get more involved? And I'm done now because we have 9 minutes. Happy.
Tashina, I thank you so much. I feel like I am in your shoes right now because of your energy in the first month of pre-development planning for a project. There's a lot coming at you. It's like standing in front of a fire hose. One of the things that you caused me to think about as you were talking about home ownership instead of multifamily rental is how you look at your capacity to take on your organization's capacity to take on the project, because you have, infill sites, or you have a street with lots, and you can think about the building in different ways. And it looks like each of your buildings is very different. So you need different architecturals and different designs. You have different lot sizes, unit counts. So are you thinking about phasing the project, doing a few at a time? How many you can do all at once? What goes through your mind when you're thinking about all of that?
Yeah. So when we first, have a project, we'll have like a big grand conceptual design, right? And then you look at the lot sizes, you look at like how many homes you're trying to put there. And then before you get to your funders, hopefully you can do this before, right? You say, can we phase this out? Would it be beneficial for us to phase it out because maybe this is too large for us right now, or do we just go at it all together? And that's something you can talk about with your architect, with your engineers, to really, have a design that can be phased out. And then maybe sometimes you go to your funders and your funders are like, hey, this is a really great project. You might want to phase it out, So it really just depends on the size and the scope of the project, and also on who's going to give you money and when they're going to give you the money. Because one vendor might say, hey, I want to help you out with this, but it might be too much for you because we know that one, you're a small organization, but two, we know some of the other projects that you have in your pipeline that you're currently doing right now, or three, this is really great. So for the example, if you can go back to the Sunrise Farms really quickly. So like we have three in this, in one of the diagrams, we have the actual layout of some of these houses, and we have three different sections, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, no, we need to phase this out, and this can be three different projects. Now I can approach a funder and say, hey, this is the overall project, but I believe it'll be more beneficial for us to phase it out. And this is what the architect says, this is what the civil engineer says, and this is what the town says, right? And then your funder can say, that makes absolute sense. Good job, gold star. Or they can say, absolutely not. You need to finish this whole thing in one, right? And figure it out. And then you just have to figure it out. But really, it's just about everybody communicating well and let the professionals do what they're doing. So.
Thanks very much. I'm going to just check on the chat now to see if we've got questions here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go. I see great bookend to yesterday's session, advancing racial equity and housing development. Will these slides be shared? Tashina, your passion for these projects is really commendable. It was really great. Okay, I don't see any questions in here, but what I did.
They're in the Q&A box.
Oh,
You got to
I'm
go to
so
the Q&A
sorry.
box.
Thank you. I don't even see the Q&A box. Here we go. Is capacity building for C3 and for-profit? I think that maybe that was for nonprofit and for-profit. As a CDFI, and I know that the Department of Housing doesn't work with for-profit entities, but as a CDFI, we work with everyone. And so I have a for-profit developer, a couple of them right now coming, and we're looking at their plan and sort of talking about capacity and thinking about how a partner could be introduced, or a phased approach could be taken. And so that's kind of where we are with that. Our capacity building programs are tailored to specific purposes depending on the funding source. But Sylvia, my contact information is at the back. I could certainly help you learn about our programs and then other programs offered by CDFIs in Connecticut. Sarah, there's also a question here from Sylvia for you about your developer fee and if it's informed by Connecticut, New England, or nationwide standards.
So on that project I was talking about, I pulled it up while our developer fee was 1.41 million and we have 400,000 deferred still. So I only earned $1 million on that. So after all that work, you know, we got $1 million for the 5 years of work, which is great to earn that. And it's based on what the project can afford, right? I'll put in generally only about 8%. I never get up to the 15% of total development costs. The state does actually cap that kind of stuff, but I'm never anywhere near that. And then what can the project afford? One of the first things that goes down is developer fee. So, yeah.
And then Sarah, how many partners did you have? Who were
Yeah,
they?
there were 12. So Capital for Change, City of Hartford, Connecticut Department of Housing, CHFA, Eversource, LISC, NeighborWorks America, NeighborWorks Capital, Redstone Equity Partners, TD Bank Foundation. We got the Housing for Everyone grant that year, TD Bank NA, and then HUD. So actually, those people all gave money into that project to make that project come together.
Sheena, for your wealth creation building concept, was it hard to convince funders of that business model? Do buyers have to buy both? Is it their choice to rent out the other unit or sell it?
So yes and no for funders. You know, some funders have been through this before, so they know exactly what they're getting themselves into. Some don't, so it's a little bit trickier to try and convince others. Some funders wanted to see a model, and you know that's kind of why we split up Adam Street. The first two as the model, and it's really successful, and they're so beautiful. The In terms of buying, yes, you do have to buy the whole house. You do have to rent it out. The first two homes, because we used the HTCC, the AMI for the home buyer is 50%, and the AMI for the renter is at 25%. So we're not just tackling just like home ownership, but we're also aiding in that rental market as well, right? Especially for people who are extremely low income and they can't necessarily afford like I shouldn't say a regular apartment, but they might have like a bigger family and they might need something a little bit more spacious. But they're still like low income, so it helps. I'm sorry, what was the next question?
I think you got it. Oh, the
No,
funders. You
yep,
have to convince the
yes,
funders.
yes. But no, you cannot sell the other side of your home. You have to keep both of them together.
Okay. So Lisa, I have a question for you. You talked about it a little bit, but what are some themes that you see that are holding developers back from starting construction? I know people come and then they come back and they refine their plans over time. What are the common frustrations?
Really the common themes that we experience. So I'm not a part of the DEP, but what I hear are similar things that I mentioned in my slides. Would be feasibility would be a huge factor. Capacity. So the agency likes to see proven track record basically on past projects, whether it's the developer, the development team, consultants, just to have that kind of like a check mark. Feasibility is real big though. It's you have to come to the table with the project that has reasonable cost per unit. And if there's any environmental concerns, those need to get addressed.
So what would you say to someone, and by the time it's gotten to you, it's already through the developer engagement process, but you must see some new developers too who don't have that track record. What kinds of support does the Department of Housing provide to help them kind of get through the pre-development process?
To get through the pre-development process, we would really just look for, we'll give them guidance on setting them up for consultants that know our process, that can provide a little bit of extra support, because we don't want to we don't want a new developer to be hurt because they've never come to us before. We do want to have that open door policy, but we just want to make sure that they have support in every aspect to get us through to pre-development and then development.
I also hear, Lisa, that you are the best troubleshooter out there.
I don't know who told you that.
So as the pre-development process is going through, and I know Sarah and Tashina both agree, as the pre-development process is going along, what kinds of hiccups come up where the Department of Housing really needs to get involved and roll up their sleeves and become more involved?
The biggest thing that I'll say is procurement, right? So procurement, not a lot of developers think about it in the early stage, but procurement is something that like an architect or consultant would need to be procured correctly for the DOH to even consider going into a development stage. So you have to make sure that those are following our guidelines for procurement, and that kind of stuff can be found on our website. I don't have it on hand right now, but if you go to our website, we have all of the procurement guidelines. But that is a big factor.
So what you're saying is that with development, because you may not know what your funding sources are going to be when you go into construction, you really have to think about being ready for anything.
Yeah, and there's a lot of developers that will have development team that they work with all the time, right? Whether they're architects or a general contractor, construction manager, but you can't come to the table with all of your parties just in the back of your pocket. You have to have it's got to be a fair game.
Okay. I think we're close to being done, but I think because we're the last session of the day, we have a little bit of wiggle room here. And we've got some questions here about Nest and about cost per unit. So I'll try to loop back with those people afterwards. But Tashina and Sarah, I was hoping very quickly you could talk about what you love about what you do. I know Tashina, you just got into this work not too long ago. Sarah, you also made a decision to get into affordable housing development. What fuels your passion?
So for me, it's that I'm constantly learning. I've been doing this for 13 years. I started at mutual housing the day after I graduated grad school. I went to UConn, got my master's in public administration. Did not start as a developer, was just there for grant reporting and stuff like that. Within 6 months, my executive director, who's been there 32 years at this point, asked if I would start looking into real estate development. I got a fantastic mentor who brought me through. He was a retiring ED who went out on consulting and basically spent years just training me. Every time I think I figured it out, I don't. So I think what keeps me coming back is that it's constantly challenging. I'm on a roller coaster, and then I get that high and I close that tax credit deal, and then there's new challenge. So I gotta finish it and figure it out. And so I never know what I'm doing every single day, and every day is different, and every project somehow comes together on a hope and a wish. And I think that's like this adrenaline rush that you actually did it. So for me, it's just like the passion of doing it, but also we're transforming lives and neighborhoods, and to see your product, to actually walk into your product at the end of the day is pretty great. As a grant writer, there's nothing to really do. You don't get to touch it. And with this, we are our own property manager. So I get to see it in all phases. And I learn too what doesn't work and what's not. Like the door latches. I can't tell you how many problems I have with door locks and how expensive they are to change out, which I never would know, except that property management complains to me and tells me I did a terrible job when I agreed to a value engineered package for less money so I could close a deal. So those kind of things keep me coming back because I'm going to do it better next time.
And Tashina, how about you? I know you were focused on public health, right, when you started?
Yeah, I actually got my master's in public health. And while I was doing my master's, I looked into affordable housing because I had recently gotten married and we were looking for a house, and I was like, this is so hard. And so, it really sparked an interest in me, because I just didn't think it was reasonable that, like people making moderate incomes can like afford a house, or like a decent house, right? And so that's when I got interested. And I reached out to a consultant in Stratford, Jen Spelsings, and then she connected me with my current boss, Kevin Taylor, who is amazing. And both of them have really guided me through like the affordable housing arena. I think what I love most about what I do now is like seeing a complete product, right? So it's nice going through like, you know, all of the pre-development things and even like trying to convince funders that they need to give us money. But it's also nice seeing a complete house and being able to place someone in that and seeing their current, you know, their faces just like light up and bright up and, you know, see them imagine their future, right? So I think for me, it's usually like the end result. I love making the connections that I have you know, during the development process, but honestly, like the end result is what makes my heart happy. So.
Well, thank you very much. We are going to wrap it up now. To the panel, thank you so much for participating. I really think that pre-development activities can really help people go from site to project and really think about their capacity. And so I thank you for your time today. This is a great panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.